Welcome to today's lecture on the psychology of perception. Perception is the process by which we organize and interpret sensory information from the environment. It plays a crucial role in how we make sense of the world around us and ultimately how we interact with it. Our perception of the world is not a passive experience, but an active process that involves a complex interplay between bottom-up sensory inputs and top-down cognitive processes. The study of perception has a rich history in psychology, dating back to the pioneering work of the German physiologist and psychologist Gustav Fechner in the mid-19th century. Since then, many researchers have contributed to our understanding of the mechanisms underlying perception, from the Gestalt psychologists of the early 20th century to the contemporary researchers using brain imaging techniques to investigate the neural basis of perception. So by the end of this lecture, I hope that you will have a deeper appreciation of the complex processes that underlie our perception of the world and how they shape our understanding of reality. You will also gain insights into how our perceptions can be influenced and manipulated both by external factors and by our own cognitive biases. So, let's dive into the fascinating world of perception. Now, perception, in essence, is the fundamental aspect of human cognition, referring to the way we interpret and make sense of the sensory information we receive from the environment. So in psychology, perception is studied as a complex process, recognizing many different factors, recognizing that it involves the integration of sensory input, along with prior knowledge, along with personal expectations, along with contextual factors, to form a coherent and meaningful representation of the world for you and for I. Perception is a multi-dimensional phenomenon, and it encompasses a wide range of sensory modalities, including vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. In this lecture, we're going to focus mainly on vision. We don't have enough time to cover everything, but I hope you recognize that this is a multidimensional experience that goes on, and it's crucial in our daily lives, as perception allows us to navigate the world. It allows us to interact with others. It allows us to make decisions based on our sensory experiences. Now, understanding how perception works is essential in a variety of fields, including neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and computer-human interfaces. But it's also important in art, in design, in simply working with people and understanding how people can read or misread a situation. Psychologists study perception to gain insights into the underlying mechanisms that govern our sensory experiences, and to develop models and theories that can explain how we perceive the world. In this lecture, we will explore the key theories and concepts that underpin the psychology of perception, including the nature of perceptual processing, and the role of attention and expectation, and the relationship between perception and other aspects of cognition, such as memory and decision-making. We will also discuss some of the challenges and limitations of studying perception and consider some of the real-world applications of research in this field. So I want to start off by telling you a bit of a hilarious story about a prank that went down and kind of went too far. It's all about a group of Aussies who decided to pull a fast one on the Australian police during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Leaders Summit, APEC, that was held in Sydney, Australia back in 2007. Now, the APEC Summit was a pretty big deal, and many roads in the area were closed for very good reasons, for security reasons, while the police presence was at an all-time high. But that didn't deter a group of satirists called the Chasers' War on Everything from pulling, or at least attempting to pull, a pretty crazy stunt. The Chasers team came up with a plan to assemble a false motorcade made up of 2 black 4-wheel drive vehicles, a black sedan, 2 motorcycles, bodyguards, and chauffeurs. They even had one of their members dress up as none other than Osama bin Laden himself. Now, for those of you that are young, you might not recognize who Osama bin Laden is, but he is was the individual that was believed to be behind the 9/11 attacks, and so was at that time the #1 fugitive in the world. And as the motorcade drove through Sydney's central business district and entered the security zone of the meeting, the group was waved on by through 2 checkpoints. Yes, you heard that right. The police had mistaken the fake motorcade for a real one and just let it pass. Unbelievable, right? And it wasn't until this individual, this host from the Chasers' War, stepped out onto the street, still dressed as bin Laden and complaining about not being invited to the APEC Summit, that the police finally realized something was amiss. The Chasers team was immediately arrested, but not before they'd gotten a good laugh out of the whole situation. Now, afterwards, the group admitted that they hadn't made much effort to disguise their prank as anything other than a joke. In fact, their security passes were printed with quote-unquote joke or quote-unquote insecurity, and the phrase, "It's pretty obvious that this isn't a real pass." And the required APEC 2007 official vehicle stickers had the name of the show printed on them. Now, despite their clear lack of effort, the police still didn't realize that they were being pranked until it was too late. The Chasers team later explained that their primary motive for the stunt was to make a statement about bin Laden not being invited to an APEC summit, where issues of terror were being discussed. The second motive was to test the event's security, which they obviously found lacking. Now, it's probably a good thing that they made such a big deal about the joke aspect of it, because they were charged, but were not ever convicted of anything because of this joke aspect to it. And that's the story of how a group of Aussies fooled the Australian police during the APEC summit back in 2007. And it just goes to show that even those trained to accurately perceive a threat can sometimes be misperceived themselves. And that ties into our whole theme here today of perception, of forming a meaning-coherent reality from our senses. Within this lecture, we will explore 3 main areas. We will explore perceiving forms, we will look at perceiving depth, and perceiving motion. So obviously, we're going to be primarily taking a look at vision within this lecture. So I want to welcome you to our exploration of perceptual systems and how perceptual systems interpret the environment. Our perceptual system is a remarkable tool that allows us to make meaning out of a vast amount of information we receive from the environment. Perception is a complex process that involves several essential processes, and one of them is sensory interaction. Sensory interaction refers to how different senses work together to create a coherent experience. One of the most common examples of sensory interaction is when taste, smell, and texture combine to create the flavor we enjoy in food. Now imagine eating a juicy, flavorful steak. The taste, the smell, and texture all work together to create the complete sensory experience. Another example of sensory interaction is when you watch a movie. The images we see and the music we hear work together to create an emotional response. The right music can intensify the emotions we feel while watching a particular scene. And this is why film scores are so essential in movies. Although we might think that we understand speech only through our sense of hearing, the visual aspect of speech is also essential. Now, one example of sensory interaction in speech is what is known as the McGurk effect. The McGurk effect is an error in perception that occurs when we perceive sounds. When the sound we hear does not match the visual cues we see, we experience confusion. For example, if we see someone say ga, but we hear ba, our brain might perceive the sound as da. This is because our visual and auditory senses work together to create meaning. And in this case, very oftentimes, our visual system overrides our hearing, and so we misperceive what is being said. Another critical perceptual process is selective attention. Our brain is continually bombarded by sensory information, but we can only pay attention to a fraction of it. Selective attention refers to the ability to focus on a particular stimulus while ignoring others. For example, if you're at a crowded party, you might be able to focus on a conversation with someone while ignoring the background noise. The ability to perceive depth is also essential for our survival. Depth perception refers to our ability to perceive the distance of objects accurately. We use depth perception to navigate our environment and to avoid obstacles. This is why it's challenging to walk in a room with poor lighting or with one eye closed. Perception, remember, is not a passive process. Our expectations, our experiences, and emotions can all influence how we perceive the environment. Top-down processing refers to how our prior knowledge and expectations influence our perception. For example, if we see a blurry image of an animal in the distance, our prior knowledge of the environment might help us recognize the animal as either a deer rather than a cow, for example. So that's it for this introductory part to our lecture, and we will continue on with perception in the next part, in our next video. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you again in a little while. Take care. Bye-bye.